What you're about to see is not a theory. It's not a myth. And it's not something science agrees on. It's something far more uncomfortable. Because once you see it, you can't unsee it. Let's start with a simple question. What would you say if someone told you that an everyday human tool was found sealed inside solid rock? Rock that geologists say is over 100 million years old, not buried, not trapped in dirt, not lodged in sediment, but completely enclosed, encased, locked in stone. The object wasn't strange. It wasn't alien-looking. It wasn't futuristic. It was a hammer. A normal-looking hammer. Iron head. Wooden handle. The kind of tool you could buy at a hardware store. And yet, according to everything we know about history, it should not exist where it was found. Not even close. Because the rock surrounding it was dated to a time long before humans. Long before civilization. Long before agriculture. Long before written language. A time when dinosaurs still walked the earth, and yet, there it was. That alone should be impossible. But here's where it gets disturbing. The hammer wasn't rusted. Not slightly, not partially. It showed almost no corrosion at all, even after supposedly spending millions of years underground. That detail alone breaks more than one scientific assumption. And this is not an isolated case, because this is not the only object like it, not even close. In the early 1900s, off the coast of a small Greek island, sponge divers pulled something strange from the ocean floor. At first, it looked like nothing, just a lump of corroded metal and stone. It sat in a museum for years, ignored, cataloged, forgotten, until it cracked open. And what fell out was something no one was prepared to see. Inside that corroded mass was a machine, not a symbol, not an ornament, a machine. A complex mechanical device made of dozens of interlocking bronze gears, precision-cut teeth, and calibrated dials. Something that looked less like an ancient artifact and more like the inside of a Swiss watch, except it was over 2,000 years old. When researchers finally scanned it with modern imaging, they were stunned. The gears were too precise. The tolerances were too tight. The design included mechanisms that, according to official history, would not be invented for another 1,500 years. One component in particular stood out, a differential gear, the same principle used in modern automobiles to allow wheels to rotate at different speeds, a piece of engineering that textbooks say ancient people did not possess. And yet, there it was. Official explanations tried to minimize it. They called it a calendar, a curiosity, an anomaly, but none of that explained how such precision engineering was possible at that time, or why it existed at all. Now pause for a moment. Think about this. Precision machines don't appear randomly. They require tools, knowledge, standardization. They require a technological ecosystem, which raises a very uncomfortable question. If machines like this existed, where's everything else? Now consider this. Technology does not function without power. You can have ideas, you can have designs, but without energy, nothing moves, nothing works. And that brings us to the next anomaly. In the 1970s, scientists analyzing uranium deposits in Africa noticed something strange. The isotope ratios were wrong. Specifically, the uranium had been depleted in exactly the way it becomes depleted after being used in a nuclear reaction. This wasn't theoretical. It wasn't speculative. The chemical signature was clear. At some point in the distant past, a nuclear reaction had taken place. Naturally, in the ground. Scientists rushed to explain it. They proposed a natural nuclear reactor, a rare coincidence, a perfect alignment of water, uranium, and geology. A reaction that somehow started, regulated itself, and shut down, without melting down or exploding. And it did this, not for days, not for years, but for hundreds of thousands of years. Perfectly stable, perfectly controlled. If that explanation sounds convenient, you're not alone. Because even modern nuclear reactors require constant monitoring. They require control systems, regulation, safety mechanisms. Yet this ancient reaction behaved as if it was being managed, as if something was controlling it. Now let's step back. We have a machine too advanced for its time, tools found where no human should exist, evidence of energy production far earlier than expected. Individually, these are curiosities. Together, they form a pattern, and that pattern leads somewhere, even more unsettling. In Egypt, archaeologists discovered a stone object, buried alongside artifacts of the earliest dynasties. At first glance, it looked ceremonial, a shallow stone disc with curved blades and a hole at its center. It was labeled as a ritual object, a bowl, a lamp, something symbolic. Except there was one problem. Its shape was wrong. Any modern engineer would recognize it immediately. The curvature, the symmetry, the internal angles. This was not art. This was a turbine, or a propellier, or a component of a machine, designed to move fluid or air. The problem? It was carved from brittle stone, a material that would shatter, under the stresses such a design implies. Unless it wasn't meant to be functional, unless it was a copy, a stone imitation, of something originally made from metal, something the people who carved it did not fully understand, something they saw, respected, and preserved, without knowing its purpose. Which leads to a disturbing possibility. What if many ancient artifacts are not tools, but replicas? Replicas of technology, left behind by a culture that did not survive. Now let's go even smaller, much smaller. In the 1990, geologists in Russia were extracting sediment from deep layers of permafrost, layers that had been undisturbed for over 100,000 years. Inside that sediment, they found something unexpected. Microscopic metal spirals, perfectly shaped, uniform, manufactured. Some were visible to the naked eye, others were smaller than a human hair. Laboratory analysis revealed their composition: copper, tungsten, molybdenum, materials that require extreme temperatures to process, materials that modern industry struggles to shape at such scales. Yet these objects were ancient, buried deep, sealed in time, and they were not rare. They were found by the thousands. Nature does not produce precision spirals, not like this, not in metal, not at that scale. These were not crystals, not accidents, not contamination. They were engineered. Which brings us to the most uncomfortable question of all. If advanced technology existed in the deep past, where did it go? Cities collapse, steel rusts, concrete crumbles. Over millions of years, even the greatest civilizations would be erased, reduced to dust, or buried, or recycled by geology itself. What if Earth is not just a planet we inherited, but a planet that has been used before? What if we are not the first to build machines, not the first to extract energy, not the first to rise, and not the first to disappear? This is not a claim. This is not a conclusion. It is a question, one raised by objects that should not exist, by timelines that do not align, by evidence that does not fit. And this is just the first anomaly. History tells us a very clean story. Humans were primitive. Technology was simple. Progress was slow, linear, predictable. Stone tools came first, then bronze, then iron. That timeline feels comforting, organized, safe, but it only works if certain objects don't exist. And the problem is, they do. Let's go back to that hammer. Not because it's dramatic, but because it's simple. Too simple. The hammer is not advanced technology. There's no circuit, no engine, no moving parts. Just iron, wood, a tool made to strike. Which is exactly why it's so disturbing. Because tools like this are unmistakable. They don't belong to myth. They don't belong to ritual. They belong to work. According to mainstream archaeology, humans capable of producing iron tools did not exist when that rock was formed. Not even close. The geological layer surrounding the hammer is dated to the early Cretaceous period, over 100 million years ago. That places it in a world dominated by dinosaurs, a world without cities, without metalworking, without humans as we know them. And yet, the hammer isn't symbolic, it isn't ceremonial, it is practical, balanced, functional, designed to be held by a hand shaped like yours, which forces a very uncomfortable question. If no humans existed, who was holding it? Skeptics often respond quickly. They say the dating must be wrong, or the rock reformed later, or the object somehow slipped inside. But those explanations struggle with one detail. The hammer is fully encased, not wedged, not cracked in, encased, which means the stone formed around it, not after, not later. But at the same time, and the metal itself raises even more questions. The iron contains an unusual chemical composition, almost no carbon, which means it's resistant to rust, in a way modern iron rarely is. Even after decades in open air, it shows almost no corrosion. That is not what we expect, not from modern tools, and certainly not from ancient ones. Now imagine this. You find a smartphone, sealed inside solid rock. The rock dates back millions of years. Even if you didn't know what a smartphone was, you would know something is wrong. The hammer is no different. And yet, this is not the only object like it. Not even close. In 1901, divers off the coast of Greece made a discovery that would quietly challenge history. They pulled up a corroded mass from a shipwreck near the island of Antikythera. At first, it looked like debris, broken statues, scrap bronze, nothing remarkable, until it began to fall apart. Inside that corroded shell was something no one expected. A machine, a complex system of gears, not one or two, dozens, interlocked, calibrated, purposeful. This was not decoration. This was engineering. The device is now known as the Antikythera mechanism, and calling it advanced doesn't quite capture the problem. Because advanced, compared to what? Compared to its time, it should not exist at all. When scientists reconstructed it digitally, they realized something startling. The mechanism could predict celestial events, eclipses, planetary positions, cycles of time, with remarkable accuracy. It functioned as a mechanical computer, built over 2,000 years ago. But the real shock came from the details. The gears were cut with extreme precision. The tolerances were tight, too tight. To achieve that level of accuracy, you need standardized tools. You need measuring instruments. You need an understanding of ratios, torque, and motion. This isn't guesswork. It's deliberate design. And then there's one component that refuses to fit the timeline. The differential gear, a mechanism that allows two connected parts to rotate at different speeds. Today, it's fundamental to automobiles. But according to engineering history, it was not formally invented until the modern era. Yet here it was, embedded in an ancient device. So historians adjusted the story. They said it was an anomaly, a one-off, a stroke of genius that went nowhere. But that explanation creates another problem. Technology does not appear in isolation. You don't accidentally invent complex machinery, you build it on top of existing knowledge, which means there must have been tools capable of making those gears, which means there must have been craftsmen trained to use them, which means there must have been infrastructure. And yet, we're told none of that existed. Now let's move to Egypt, because if any civilization is assumed to be symbolic rather than technical, it's ancient Egypt. Monuments, rituals, mythology, that's the narrative. But buried among early dynastic artifacts is a stone object that refuses to behave like art. It's called the Sabu disc. At first glance, it looks ceremonial, a shallow bowl, thin walls. But look closer. The disc has curved blades, symmetrical, aerodynamic, and a central hub, not decorative, structural. Engineers who have examined the disc notice something immediately. Its shape matches components used in modern turbines and pumps. The curvature isn't random, it's functional, designed to move fluid or air efficiently. But here's the catch. The disc is made of stone, a brittle material, one that would shatter if subjected to the stresses. Such a design implies, which means one thing. This object was not meant to function. It was a copy, a stone replica of something originally made from metal, something the craftsman had seen but could not reproduce in its original form. So they did what humans often do. They preserved the shape without understanding the purpose. This idea is deeply uncomfortable because it suggests that what we call ritual objects may actually be imitations, echoes, of technologies that no longer exist. And this pattern keeps repeating. An object appears. It doesn't fit the timeline. It's explained away as symbolic, ceremonial, or coincidental, and then we move on. But when you place these objects side by side, the hammer, the mechanism, the disk. A pattern begins to emerge. They are not artistic. They are not religious. They are functional, and functionality implies intent. Design implies knowledge, and knowledge implies builders. Which brings us back to the same question. If these objects exist, someone had to build them. And if someone built them, where's everything else? Technology does not run on ideas. It runs on power. You can have blueprints. You can have knowledge. You can even have brilliant engineers. But without energy, nothing moves. Nothing spins. Nothing computes. Nothing works. This is the part of history most people never think about. Not tools. Not machines. Energy. Because energy is the true foundation of civilization. Stone tools require muscle. Metal tools require heat. Complex machines require sustained power. And advanced technology requires something far more controlled. Which brings us to a place most people have never heard of. Deep in Central Africa, in what is now Gabon, there is a region called Oklo. At first glance, it looks unremarkable. Rock, dirt, dense of forest. Nothing about it suggests anything unusual ever happened there, until scientists began studying the uranium. In the 1970s, physicists noticed something strange. The uranium ore at Oklo was missing a specific isotope, uranium-225, the very isotope required for nuclear reactions, the same isotope used in modern nuclear reactors. This wasn't a minor discrepancy. It wasn't statistical noise. It was significant depletion, the kind of depletion that only happens after nuclear fission, which immediately raised an alarming question. Had a nuclear reaction occurred here in the distant past? Further analysis made things worse. Inside the rock, scientists found byproducts, fission products, nuclear waste, the unmistakable chemical fingerprints left behind after a reactor operates. There was no ambiguity. At some point, this uranium had been used. The official explanation came quickly. They called it a natural nuclear reactor. According to this theory, water seeped into the uranium deposit, acted as a moderator, and triggered a chain reaction by pure chance. On paper, the explanation sounds plausible. But when you examine the details, it starts to fall apart. Modern nuclear reactors are incredibly delicate systems. They require precise geometry, exact material ratios, constant monitoring. Without control, they overheat, they melt down, they explode. Yet the Oklo reaction did something extraordinary. It ran in cycles. It turned on. It shut down. It stabilized itself. Over and over again. For hundreds of thousands of years. Let that sink in. This reaction did not spiral out of control. It did not poison itself. It behaved as if it were regulated, as if something was managing it. Even more unsettling is what happened to the waste. In modern nuclear facilities, radioactive byproducts are a serious problem. They migrate. They contaminate groundwater. Containment is extremely difficult. At Oklo, the waste barely moved. Over billions of years, the radioactive elements remained localized, trapped, contained, almost as if they had been placed with intention. Nature does many things well, but nature does not build containment systems. Nature does not regulate nuclear reactions with precision. Nature does not think about safety. And yet, this ancient reaction behaved better than many human-built reactors, which raises an uncomfortable possibility. What if Oklo wasn't just a coincidence? What if it wasn't purely natural? What if it was used? Now pause. This does not mean someone built a nuclear power plant exactly like ours. That assumption misses the point. Technology does not have to look modern to be advanced. It only has to work. If a civilization existed with knowledge of nuclear processes, if they understood moderation, control, and long-term stability, then Oklo stops looking like an accident. It starts looking like infrastructure. And infrastructure changes everything. Because infrastructure implies planning. It implies maintenance. It implies a system larger than a single discovery. You don't harvest nuclear energy for curiosity. You do it because you need power. Large amounts of it, consistent amounts of it, which brings us back to the objects we saw earlier. Machines, precision devices, functional designs. Those things don't run on muscle. They don't run on fire. They require sustained energy. So ask yourself this: if ancient technology existed, where did its power come from? The standard historical narrative has no answer. It skips this step entirely. And that omission is critical. Because energy sources define civilizations. Steam defined the industrial age. Electricity defined the modern world. Nuclear power defines a technological threshold. Cross that threshold, and a civilization changes forever. But power also leaves scars, trace, signatures in the earth itself. And Oklo is exactly that, a scar. Now imagine a different timeline. Not one where technology rises for a few centuries, but one where it rises, stabilizes, and then collapses. Cities erode, structures vanish, metals oxidize. But nuclear byproducts, they linger. They embed themselves deep into geology, waiting, which means something unsettling. If an ancient civilization reached a level of energy control we barely manage today, then its greatest legacy would not be monuments. It would be waste. And that waste would be nearly invisible, unless you knew where to look. Oklo may not be proof, but it is evidence. Evidence that something happened long before humans were supposed to understand nuclear physics. And if power existed, then systems existed. And if systems existed, then industry existed. Which leads us to the next question, not about energy, but about scale. Because power suggests infrastructure, and infrastructure suggests industry, and industry leaves behind something even harder to explain. When people think about ancient technology, they imagine tools, hammers, chisels, simple devices made to survive. What they don't imagine are spare parts, because spare parts imply something bigger. They imply machines, and machines imply systems. A machine part is never meant to exist alone. It only makes sense when connected to something else, which is why some of the most disturbing artifacts are not complete devices, but fragments. Let's return to Egypt, not to pyramids, not to hieroglyphs, but to a single object that refuses to behave like art. It's known as the Disk of Sabu. At first glance, it looks ceremonial. A shallow stone dish, thin, delicate, something symbolic. But symbols don't follow engineering rules, and this object does. The disk has 3 curved blades. They are evenly spaced, perfectly symmetrical. Each blade bends inward toward a central hub, not outward, not randomly. Inward. That detail matters. Because in engineering, curvature is never decoration. Curvature controls flow, air, water, energy. Modern engineers recognize the shape immediately, not as art, but as a functional component, a turbine, a pump impeller, a flywheel element, something designed to move fluid efficiently. Now here's the problem. The disk is made of stone, a brittle, fragile material. Stone does not tolerate stress. It fractures, it shatters, it fails. If this disk were spun at speed, it would explode, which tells us something crucial. This object was not meant to operate. It was meant to represent. That suggests it is not the original. It is a copy. Think about that. Someone carved a stone version of a machine part, not because stone was better, but because stone was all they had. This changes the question entirely. We are no longer asking, what is this object? We are asking, what was it copied from? Now compare the disk of Sabu to modern industrial components. Overlay the shapes. The similarities are unsettling. The blade angles, the hub geometry, the balance. These are not aesthetic coincidences. They are performance-driven decisions. Decisions made by someone who understood how machines behave, which leads to the next issue: manufacturing. To create thin curved blades like these, you need precise tools. You need controlled cutting. You need rotational symmetry. Stone carving by hand does not easily produce this, especially not without breakage. Even today, replicating the disc of Sabu is extremely difficult. Modern craftsmen struggle to reproduce it without cracking the material. So how was it done? And more importantly, why was it done at all? If the object were purely symbolic, there would be no reason to follow functional geometry so precisely. Symbols don't care about efficiency, machines do, which suggests the people who carved it were not inventing the form, they were preserving it. This idea appears again and again in ancient artifacts, objects that look mechanical but are made from unsuitable materials, stone copies, ceramic imitations, versions that cannot function. This is what anthropologists call cargo cult behavior. When a society encounters advanced technology it does not understand, it imitates the shape, not the function. But here's the problem. Cargo cults don't invent turbines. They copy what they see. So where is the original? That question becomes even more disturbing when we look for manufacturing sites, workshops, factories, industrial debris. We find none. No slag heaps, no metal waste, no ruined foundries, nothing that looks like industry. This absence has been used as an argument against advanced ancient technology. If it existed, skeptics say, we would find the factories. But that assumption may be flawed because it assumes machines were meant to last. Modern industry leaves scars because it uses bulk, steel, concrete, permanent infrastructure. But what if an earlier technology was different? What if it was optimized for efficiency, not permanence? Lightweight materials, modular systems, components designed to be recycled or to degrade. Think about modern electronics. If our civilization vanished tomorrow, what would remain in a million years? Not smartphones, not data centers, not power grids, mostly nothing. Plastic degrades, metals corrode, circuits dissolve, only small fragments would survive. Odd shapes, unidentifiable pieces, out of context, which brings us back to the disc of Sabu. A fragment, a representation, a leftover. It may not be evidence of a machine, but it is evidence of memory. Memory of something functional, something important enough to preserve in stone. And memory implies loss. Because no one preserves what they still have, they preserve what is gone. So now we are faced with a deeply unsettling possibility. What if ancient machines existed, but were never meant to last? What if they were designed to disappear? Mini cliffhanger. Pasa, because if that's true, then the absence of evidence is no longer evidence of absence. When people imagine lost civilizations, they picture ruins, stone blocks, collapsed temples, broken statues buried in sand. What they don't imagine is technology so small that it leaves no ruins at all. Because not all technology is built to be seen. Some of it exists below the limits of human perception, invisible. To understand this, we have to travel far from deserts and monuments, far from Egypt, far from Greece, into the frozen wilderness of northern Russia. In the early 1992, a group of geologists working in the Ural Mountains were searching for gold. They were not archaeologists. They were not looking for history. They were doing routine geological surveys in some of the most remote terrain on Earth. This region is harsh, frozen ground, permafrost layers untouched for tens of thousands of years, sediment compressed and sealed by time. Anything found there should belong to the deep past. At first, they noticed nothing unusual, just sand, gravel, mineral residue, until something caught the light. Tiny metallic objects, barely visible. At first, they assumed contamination. Industrial debris, fragments from machinery. That explanation would have made sense, except for one detail. The objects were found deep underground, 10 meters, sometimes deeper, embedded in permafrost layers that had not been disturbed for over 100,000 years. Modern machines do not bury debris that deep, and they certainly don't do it without leaving any trace on the surface. As excavation continued, the number of objects increased. Not one, not a handful, thousands. When samples were sent to laboratories, the real shock began. Under optical microscopes, the objects appeared unusual. But under electron microscopes, they became impossible. What scientists saw were perfectly formed metal spirals, uniform, consistent, manufactured. Some were small enough to hold. Others were microscopic, so small that dozens could fit across the width of a human hair. At that scale, human hands are useless. No matter how skilled, no matter how careful, you cannot carve metal manually. At the nanoscale, you cannot twist wire that thin with fingers. You cannot even see it without advanced equipment. Which brings us to the first major problem. Scissor. These objects are too small to be made by hand. That alone eliminates primitive explanations. No chisels, no hammers, no simple tools. But the size is only the beginning. Because when scientists analyzed the material composition, the situation became even stranger. The larger spirals were made of copper. Unusual, but not impossible. The smallest spirals, however, were made of tungsten and molybdenum. This is where the story becomes deeply uncomfortable. Tungsten is one of the most difficult metals to work with. It has an extremely high melting point, over 3,400 degrees Celsius, hotter than molten lava, hotter than most industrial furnaces. You cannot melt tungsten in a campfire. You cannot shape it in a primitive forge. Even modern industry struggles to manipulate it precisely. To process tungsten at the nanoscale, you need extreme heat, controlled atmospheres, specialized equipment Hammond, advanced understanding of material science. And yet, here it was, buried deep beneath frozen earth. Thousands of microscopic tungsten spirals. This alone destroys the idea of accidental formation. Nature creates crystals. Nature creates fractals. Nature creates chaos. Nature does not create perfectly uniform metal springs. And these were not rare. They were not anomalies. They were abundant. Which brings us to the second problem, material. These metals are not chosen randomly. Tungsten and molybdenum are used in modern technology. Because of their strength, heat resistance, and stability, they appear in electronics, in aerospace components, in high-performance systems where failure is not an option. These are industrial materials, not decorative, not symbolic, functional. Now ask yourself this: why would anyone, thousands of years ago, choose the most difficult metals available to create objects? Too small to see? Decoration makes no sense. Ritual makes no sense. Art makes no sense. These are components. Which brings us to the third and most unsettling problem: quantity. If this were the work of a single genius, a one-time experiment, we might expect a few pieces. But that's not what was found. These spirals appeared in large numbers, across multiple excavation sites, in different layers. Consistent. This suggests repeatability, standardization, production. In other words, manufacturing at the nanoscale. To manufacture at that level, you need clean environments, precision control, automation, processes that are invisible to the naked eye. This is not craftsmanship, it is industry. But industry leaves traces. factories, waste, infrastructure. So where is it? This is where assumptions fail us, because we imagine industry as something massive. Smokestacks, concrete, steel. But that's our industry. What if a different civilization optimized differently? What if their technology was designed to be lightweight, distributed, disposable, invisible over time? Modern microelectronics already follow this logic. Our most advanced systems are also the hardest to find. If our civilization vanished, what would remain after 100,000 years? Not computers, not satellites, not data, only fragments, unrecognizable, out of context, which is exactly what these spirals are. Fragments of something that no longer exists. Some researchers have speculated about possible functions, sensors, structural elements, conductive components, even early forms of nanoscale machinery. Others go further. They suggest these objects may have been part of vast systems, dispersed, distributed, almost like technological dust. But speculation isn't the point. The point is this: these objects cannot be explained by primitive technology. They cannot be explained by natural processes, and they cannot be explained as isolated curiosities. They are small, but they imply something enormous, a technological capability far beyond what the timeline allows, a form of engineering that does not leave monuments, only residue. And that leads us to a disturbing realization. If advanced technology once existed, it may not have vanished in flames, or floods, or cataclysms. It may have simply faded, broken down, returned to dust, invisible to history. This was not primitive technology. It was invisible technology. And if invisible technology once covered the planet, what kind of world would it leave behind? Up to this point, we've talked about objects, artifacts, fragments, anomalies, things that shouldn't exist, according to the timeline we're taught. But eventually, all of those questions lead to one place. Not an object, not a machine, but a hypothesis, a deeply uncomfortable one. What if human history is not a straight line? What if it's a cycle? We tend to imagine civilization as a one-way process, primitive to advanced, simple to complex, past to future, progress, always moving forward. But nature doesn't work that way. Seasons are cycles, climate is cyclical, extinction is cyclical. Even the planet itself operates in loops. So why would civilization be different? This idea isn't new. Historians have noticed it. Civilizations rise, they stabilize, they collapse, over and over again. What is new is how completely mentor a civilization can disappear. We assume that if an advanced society existed, it would leave behind obvious evidence. Cities, skyscrapers, roads, factories. But that assumption quietly ignores the most powerful force of all, time. Time is not neutral. Time is destructive. Take metal. Steel feels permanent to us. Solid, heavy, enduring. But steel rusts. Rust becomes oxide. Oxide breaks down. Given enough time, metal doesn't stay metal. It returns to the earth as minerals, as dust. After a few thousand years, structures weaken. After tens of thousands, they collapse. After hundreds of thousands, they vanish. Now think bigger. Cities, concrete cracks, rebarcorodes. Foundations shift. Vegetation grows. Earth moves. Given enough time, a city doesn't become a ruin. It becomes soil. Look at ancient cities we do know about. Many weren't discovered. They were buried, covered by sediment, hidden under farmland, erased by floods, landslides, and growth. And those cities were built with stone, with bulk, with mass. Now imagine a civilization that built differently, lighter materials, higher efficiency, less bulk. Imagine a society that optimized for performance, not permanence. Modern civilization is already moving that way. Our most advanced technologies are also the most fragile. Smartphones, servers, satellites, microchips. If humanity vanished tomorrow, what would survive? Not data centers, not power grids, not vehicles. Plastic degrades, electronics corrode, batteries leak. In 100,000 years, very little would remain. And in a million, almost nothing. Now take that idea and stretch it further. What if a previous civilization reached technological heights we barely understand, and then collapsed? Not necessarily through war, not necessarily through disaster, but through time, through entropy, through slow decay. Now consider this thought. We call oil, coal, and gas natural resources, fossil fuels, remnants of ancient life. But from another perspective, they are concentrated energy, carbon, stored potential. What if earlier civilizations extracted resources we don't yet recognize as technological remnants? What if what we mine today is not just geology, but residue? This is where the hypothesis becomes uncomfortable. What if Earth has been used before, not as a home, but as a source? This does not require aliens. It does not require science fiction. It only requires time. Imagine a civilization that harvested materials, built technology, extracted energy, and eventually declined. Over millions of years, everything they built would be erased, except trace, chemical anomalies, odd artifacts, unexplainable leftovers, which is exactly what we see. Nuclear signatures in ancient rock, precision objects out of place, microscopic components buried deep. Not proof, but hints. And here's the most unsettling part. We assume that if such a civilization existed, it would have been us. Human, recognizable. But that assumption may not even matter, because the question isn't who lived here before. The question is, how many times this has happened? Civilization may not be rare, collapse may be inevitable, not because of mistakes, but because complexity has limits. Every system grows, every system stabilizes, every system eventually breaks down. And when it does, the planet doesn't remember names. It doesn't remember cultures, it only remembers chemistry, which means something unsettling. If civilizations can rise and disappear so completely that we mistake their remnants for geology, then our own civilization is not immune. We are not unique. We are not permanent. We are simply the current layer, and layers can be buried. This is not a prediction. This is not a warning. It's an observation. Time does not care how advanced you are. So the uncomfortable hypothesis is this. What if everything we've seen is not evidence of impossibility, but evidence of repetition? If this happened before, it can happen again. And that leaves us with one final question. So now we have to ask the question. That's easy to avoid, but impossible to ignore. What about us? Up until now, we've been looking backward, at objects, at anomalies, at traces left behind by something that no longer exists. But eventually, every story like this turns inward, because whatever happened before, we are here now. We like to think of ourselves as different, smarter, more advanced, more permanent. We build higher than ever before. We move faster. We store more information than any civilization in history. Our cities glow at night, like constellations on the surface of the planet. Our machines talk to each other. Our knowledge travels instantly. From the inside, it feels unstoppable. But from the outside, it might look very familiar. Let's run a simple thought experiment. Not dramatic, not apocalyptic, just quiet. Imagine humanity disappears tomorrow. No explosions, no global war, just gone. What happens next? In the first few days, systems begin to fail. Power plants shut down. Satellites drift. Data centers go dark. Within weeks, water floods subways. Elevators stop mid-shaft. Traffic lights freeze. Within years, plants reclaim the streets. Roots break concrete. Steel begins to rust. Glass shatters. Paint peels. Buildings weaken. Within centuries, cities collapse. Not violently, silently, and within thousands of years, there is very little left to recognize. Now, stretch that timeline further. 10,000 years. 100,000. A million. What survives? Not videos, not books, not the internet. Data does not fossilize. Plastic fragments scatter. Electronics corrode. Batteries leak and dissolve. Our most advanced technologies are also our most fragile. Eventually, what remains is chemistry, traces in soil, odd concentrations of elements, unusual patterns in rock, things that future scientists might notice, but not immediately understand. Now imagine beings in the far future, not necessarily human, not necessarily like us. They dig, they analyze, they argue, they find anomalies, strange materials, odd isotopes, unexplained remnants, and they debate. Was this natural? Was this accidental? Or was something here before us? They might find a rusted alloy and mistake it for mineral. They might find microscopic components and call them geological curiosities. They might find traces of energy use and argue endlessly about coincidence. Sound familiar? Because that's exactly what we are doing now. We look at the past through the lens of our own assumptions. We assume intelligence looks like us. We assume technology leaves monuments. We assume progress is permanent. But the planet doesn't share those assumptions. Earth is patient. It erases gently, layer by layer. Civilization becomes sediment. Technology becomes chemistry. Memory becomes noise. And the cycle continues. This isn't a warning. It's not a prophecy. It's simply perspective. If we disappeared tomorrow, what would future archaeologists find? And would they believe it was us? Or would they say the same thing we say now? That shouldn't exist. Let me know what you think.